Today, a king, a sheriff and a PI all walk into a comic together. As amazing as the mainline Flash Gordon comic is right now with its fantastic sci-fi adventure story, it's far from the only story that's worth telling in the Flash Gordon universe. This is Flash Gordon Quarterly, number 1. Hello there, Comic Clan, and welcome to Comics on the Cross, the greatest YouTubers you've never heard of. I, of course, am your host for today, Cross, and today we are checking out Flash Gordon Quarterly number 1 from Mad Cave Studios. But before we delve into today's video, please make sure to go down below and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future content coming from us here, including an upcoming interview that drops later this week with Southard, one of the writers on this very comic, so you don't want to miss out on that. Also, if you're enjoying the content, please go ahead and click that like button, as it really does help us out. Also, up in the corner you will see a little card appearing for our review of Flash Gordon number 1, so you can go and check out that, and also Defenders of the Earth number 1, and get caught up with all of the amazing Flash Gordon content that's coming out from Mad Cave Studios right now. But let's go ahead and dive into today's review. Flash Gordon Quarterly number 1 is an anthology comic book made up of 3 different stories. The first story is The Fall of King Vultan, written by Culver with artwork from Pasquale Qualano. Colours are by Englert and lettering from Pritchett. The second story is The Battle of Little Mingo, written by Southard with artwork from Nuno Plati. Colours are by Joao, Lemos and lettering from Beaudoin. And the third and final story is Flash Detective Services, written by Jordan Thomas, with artwork from Russel, Olson, and lettering from Gattoni. As our issue begins, and the first story, The Fall of King Vultan, we see an army of hawkmen soaring through the skies. We don't really know where they're coming from or where they're going to, but as they fly, one of the commanders inquires of the king that there's a new ruler in Mingo, and should they perhaps have someone step in as an ambassador on behalf of the Hawkmen with the new ruler. And he even puts forward the name of the prince who's flying with them as a possible candidate for someone who would be great in that position. King Vultan, however, literally lets out a laugh at the idea of this, believing his son Talon to not be ready for such an important task. The prince takes great offence at this, and tries to reason with his father that he is a Hawkman soldier and is more than capable of the task of being an ambassador for his people with the new ruler of Mingo. He also implores his father to please stop using the name Talon for him as a childhood nickname, and is very belittling for the new role that he is currently within. But before the king has any sort of chance to respond to his son, they are all of a sudden attacked by a group of mercenaries hired by Ming the Merciless. The Hawkmen spring into action trying to defend against their attackers. They put up a valiant effort, but unfortunately, King Vultan is blasted by one of the mercenaries and begins to plummet towards the ground. The prince immediately begins to dive after his father in an attempt to save him. Unfortunately, the king is too heavy, and the prince is only able to slow his descent and lessen the impact from his landing. King Vultan tries to get his son to save himself, but the prince refuses, and both of the Hawkmen crash into the forest below. The two Hawkmen, after landing from their great fall, assess their current situation. The prince is unharmed, however his father has injured one of his wings and is unable to return to the battle or even get into the air. The king asks his son to go back to the palace in order to send reinforcements. When his son starts to question him because it will take him so long to return, the king tells him, "You're not going to return. If something happens to me, you're the next king, so you're going to wait there until I come home." The prince absolutely refuses. He has no intention of leaving his father behind, not believing his father would be able to survive this situation and make it out of here, or that the troops would get here in time to give any sort of aid. Plus, if he takes off from this current location and the enemy spots him, they will have a direct idea of where his father is. And there's no way he can survive an onslaught straight on from the enemy. His father, really not happy with the situation and not happy that his son is going against him, threatens that he'll be punished. And the young prince retorts to him, "Well, in order to punish me, it means you'll have to still be king and survive this situation." The king looks on with a smirk on his face at the rebellious insolence coming from his son, and maybe sees a little bit of his own self in him at that moment. The mercenaries hunt through the forest for the Hawkmen, looking carefully for the king as they've been ordered to bring him back dead or alive, meaning their boss wants a body. So as they trudge through the forest looking to try and find their prize, the king and the prince have set a trap for the mercenaries. Although there are only two of them, they are easily able to outmatch the mercenaries in hand-to-hand combat and dispatch of them fairly quickly. The Hawkmen take their sky cycles, take one for the king so that he can return home without having to worry about his injury, and they take a second. This one they choose to aim at the ship that the mercenaries arrived in. They set it on course to collide and cause the ship to go up in a massive explosion. Fighting side by side allows the king and the prince to open up to one another. King Vultan doesn't want his son to get hurt and make the same mistakes that he made in his life and in his ruling. The prince understands but states that those mistakes were what forged him as a good father, a great man, and an even better king. And he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he wasn't able to live up to that legacy of greatness. As this first story comes to a close, the king agrees with his son that it's time for him to start forging his own legacy and path, and marks this by beginning to refer to his son not as Talon, but by his true name, Vultan II. Next up is the Battle of Little Mingo, and this is our first real venture into another world in the Flash Gordon multiverse, as we completely switch genres and go from a sci-fi epic to a Wild West story. Let's jump on in and see what this western has to offer. Our second story begins with Sheriff Gordon and Deputy Arden pinned down by a posse of outlaws, and these outlaws don't seem intent on letting up anytime soon. The deputy asks what they're going to do, and Sheriff Gordon tells her that she's going to make a run for it out the back door while he holds them off. She is completely against this and refuses to leave as she believes he will certainly die if he's left here on his own. He asks her to please make a run for it. They have already lost Doc, they've lost most of the people in Little Mingo, and these bandits have been on them for days. At the very least, if Deputy Arden can get out of here and survive, then Flash honestly believes that it's at least been worth something then. And he'll do his best to hold them off and make sure that she can get away. The deputy reluctantly agrees, and as Sheriff Gordon steps out to face the bandits and awaits them pulling the trigger and finishing him off, all of a sudden a voice shouts out and tells them to stand down. A rider dressed in white approaches. Governor Ming T. Marcellus. and says that he would like a word with this resilient desert rat. The governor explains that this entire valley, including the town of Little Mingo, all belong to him. And he doesn't understand why someone would be fighting so hard to protect a complete ghost town. Sheriff Gordon tries to explain that this is his hometown. He grew up here and that's reason enough for him to stand and defend it. But the governor isn't buying it. He doesn't believe him and thinks that he knows about the sea of oil that is underneath the town and the value that the land truly holds. Believing that Flash is still trying to play him, the governor says that he's been told the sheriff is quite a marksman and challenges him to a duel, with the winner taking Little Mingo. Flash agrees and is immediately blasted in the shoulder by Governor Marcellus. He claims his victory and is about to shoot Flash one more time, point blank, to finish him off. But before he can pull the trigger, he is blasted right between the eyes and drops to the ground, dead. Our second story comes to an end, with Flash turning to see Deputy Arden, rifle over her shoulder, telling the bandits that per the rules of the duel, Sheriff Gordon is still breathing and the governor isn't. So before this escalates any further, get the hell out of Little Mingo. Our third and final story is Flash Detective Services. This story starts with private investigator Flash Gordon chained up and hanging over a vat of molten metal. Not the start I expected for this, but we get very much the classical, so you're probably wondering how I got here sort of intro to this. And while he's hanging over the vat, we then flash back to earlier in the day, back at his office. Flash starts his day talking with his partner Hans Zarkov, who's gifting him a wristwatch with a built-in buzzsaw. Although right now, Flash has no idea how handy that gift will become. As they're talking, in walks a very well-dressed woman named Aura. She has a missing person case for Flash. Her fiancé, Baron Prince, a politician who has been talking about ending corruption in the city, has now been missing for 2 days. His first stop in the search for Baron is a meeting with the police lieutenant Dale Arden. Lieutenant Arden, a friend of Flash's and once upon a time possibly something more, informs him that there is a lengthy list of suspects due to how openly Baron Prince was opposing the crime in the city, but he specifically spoke about driving out gangs operating in the smelting district. Flash thanks her for the tip and heads there to see if he can turn up anything. As Flash begins to hit up some of the criminals in the area, he starts to realise that everybody seems to be a little bit on edge. But after following around some whispers, some rumours, and giving out a few financial incentives to people in the area, he starts to make some headway. Unfortunately, as soon as he starts to make that headway, he is jumped by a couple of gang members. These gang members are from the Hawkmen. They beat down Flash, lay into him with no real trying to get information, and then tie him up and hang him over a vat of molten metal. And with that, we're back where we started at the beginning of the story. Flash uses his new wristwatch with buzzsaw attachment. From Hans Zarkov to cut through the ropes and swing to safety. He hides in the shadows, and when the Hawkmen return and are distracted by the fact that he has disappeared and no longer where they left him, he grabs a steel pipe and begins to beat down the gangsters. In the next room, he finds Baron Prince tied up and having received a similar beatdown to what he has, but there's no permanent damage. Flash is able to escape the building along with Baron and get him back to the authorities and reunited with Aura. For his amazing work, Flash is given accommodation from the mayor and receives a nice kiss on the cheek from Aura as well, although Lieutenant Arden doesn't seem too thrilled about that one. And the issue comes to a close, with Flash sitting in his office reading through the paper when all of a sudden Hans brings in his pants from the caper. He said he was taking them to the dry cleaners and found something interesting in the pocket. Something that Flash believes he picked up while he was in the smelting building. It's a card which says "Leave no witnesses." Signed MM. And the card is for the Mongol Club. I thoroughly enjoyed this venture into the world of Flash Gordon. It definitely veers off and away from the big like sci-fi epic that we are used to with this sort of thing. Flash Gordon is well known for being a big sci-fi epic story, adventures, and this managed to kind of veer away from that, and I think that was definitely for the best. Because kind of like when I talked about Flash Gordon #1, like this property is now 90 years old. Flash Gordon is one of the original comic book heroes, one of the original sci-fi heroes in comics. Before Superman, before Batman, before Marvel was anywhere near taking place and becoming the powerhouse that it is in comics. Flash Gordon existed and has been sustained for 90 years. So I appreciate that Mad Cave is taking the opportunity to create a comic like this where these creators can come together and just be allowed to do something out of the box. Now, I don't know if these were stories that the creators came up with and pitched to Mad Cave, or whether this was stuff that Mad Cave had ideas for and went, hey, let's find creators that can pull this off. I don't know which way it happened. But either way, this is a great showing for these creators on what they can do. Taking a property like Flash Gordon and just having fun with it. A great thing with something like Flash Gordon Quarterly is I honestly feel like it's a comic where it's like the main title is the epic that's over there, but this is one to remember how to have fun. And each story is different. Each story presents as something else. The first one with the Hawkmen could very much be something that takes place in the current mainline Flash comic. The only thing that tells me that it doesn't is it talks about a new ruler of Mongo, and obviously in the current Flash main comic, there isn't a Mongo anymore. It's been destroyed. If it wasn't for that detail, this could literally be something that takes place in the mainline comic. It's something that's very familiar for Flash Gordon fans. Whereas the other ones, the Battle of Little Mingo and Flash Detective Services, are completely different stories. They're Elseworlds stories, for lack of a better term. They're alternate universes where Flash isn't a sci-fi hero that's in space fighting on an alien planet. He's a sheriff in a small town, or he's a detective, and they were just fun stories overall, and I really just praise them for what they done. Because I'll be honest, like I said in that review as well, not to again reference back to that, but like I wasn't a Flash Gordon fan before really getting into the new comics. I wasn't... he was a character I knew about, but I knew nothing of the world, so I appreciate there was a story to let you connect with the Hawkmen and King Vultan and Prince Vultan II, and getting to experience these characters that we've not met in the mainstay story yet. There's something that was a bit familiar, and I appreciate the other stories of Lewis Southard, who one of the things he's best known for now is Midnight Western Theatre, and using that expertise of having written a off-kilter Western type story to say, hey, what would happen if Flash Gordon was a Western? And telling this great story, and for what he had with 8 pages, he told a great story of this great standoff between Flash and even meeting Governor, was it Ming de Marcellus, and then in the Flash Detective Services, getting this story of like the Hawkmen are a gang and they've managed to kidnap a governor who is obviously one of the main characters that works with Ming, or who turns against Ming, and or is based on Ming's daughter for the original series, and bringing in these other characters and giving them other things to do and other connections. It's like, it was really well done. I really appreciated these. Were just really great fun stories and really great fun adventures. The Hawkmen story is definitely on my alley. I'm a big sci-fi guy. Sci-fi, western, and detective story, I'm going to go for the sci-fi story, so that one definitely stood out to me, and I thought the writing in it was phenomenal. It was clearly the headline one. As you can see on the screen right now, it's the front cover, it's the main title of this issue of Flash Gordon Quarterly. Most of the effort was put into this one. Most of the time was given to this one, and it was worth it. It was an enjoyable story. I would love to see more told with the Hawkmen. And the Hawkmen are just really cool characters to work with from the looks of it. I very much enjoyed the Battle of Little Mingo. For a basic self-contained 8-page story, it was a really cool story. It was a really great little story of this Western, and I would love to see, if given the opportunity, how he could expand this. How Lewis Southard could expand this world, and how he could build it up, and how he could do some more with it, and what else happens in the world. How would he interpret other characters, like the Hawkmen, for example, who were mainstays in both the other stories, don't appear in this. How would they get interpreted in the Western? You know, what about Aura and, you know, these other characters, and, you know, the Doc is dead, but what would it have been like with him around? And I would love to see those characters explored more. And for the detective services, honestly, it was probably my least favourite of the three. I don't know if it just happens, like, it's been a lot of stuff that I've seen coming out lately, but since we started, like, releasing reviews in May, I have seen a lot of detective comics coming out and a lot of detective stuff and those tropes, and this one really played into the tropes, and I don't know if I just really enjoyed the first two stories and I was like, I wasn't feeling the third story when I got to it, but it didn't hit the same for me as the others. It was done a decent job, but I definitely feel like it didn't give me the same vibe as the others. But it was still an enjoyable enough story, and it was still very well written for what it was, and it was written in the style of that the word I keep trying to mind is pop, and I don't know if it's the right word for it, but that kind of 1920s, you know, noir comic style, and I appreciate that each of the writers took the chance to put it in those styles. And speaking of the various styles, the artist did a phenomenal job as well. Pasquale, Qualano, Nuno, Plati, and Russel Mark Owens all did phenomenal job, as well as Mark Englert and Joao Lemos. If I've mispronounced any of those, I apologise, but then with their colouring as well, and the art was just phenomenal in these. The first one was probably my favourite art. I love that style of art, those great bold characters, great deep colours, beautifully kind of drawn. It reminds me of epics like Jim Lee's kind of style of artwork that he's known for, or Dan Mora, or stuff like that. Like, that stuff always grabs me. That is, without a doubt, my favourite. When it came to the artwork for Battle of Little Mingo, I loved that it changed it up so much. The first one was very much like, again, like the mainline comic of Flash Gordon. The Battle of Little Mingo, felt like an old school Western comic, felt like a 1960s. Even the colour scheme, the colours felt like they were slightly faded. There was a lot of reds and oranges and, like, you know, that kind of tan, sandy sort of colour to things. And it very much put you in the feel of the environment. And I thought the artwork was brilliant. It was a little bit, it felt a little more cartoony, if that's the right style, the right way to describe it. And yeah, it was very beautifully done. And then, of course, the Flash Detective Services artwork, it reminded me specifically of stuff like The Spirit. It was 100% done in that sort of style of detective story, but it's not quite drawn in a noir way. It's more, a little more colourful, a little more popping with stuff, but the layouts of everything, the way everything was placed out, felt a lot more like that. And I think this is 100% well worth picking up. If you are a fan of Flash Gordon, want to experience more of that world, or just want to get a great experience of these writers and these artists and people doing their job and just getting to have fun with stories and telling off the wall stories of stuff that's like, hey, this is a Flash Gordon story, but not really a Flash Gordon story. It keeps all the same beats but turns it on its head. This is something that you'll definitely enjoy. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I would highly recommend picking it up, and obviously it's quarterly, so it's going to come out every few months, and I honestly can't wait for a few months time when we excuse me, when we get issue 2 for Flash Gordon Quarterly. I believe it's December it's hitting. Yeah, I think it's December the next one comes out, so we'll wrap up the year with another one. And I think it's well worth checking out, and I can't wait to see that second issue and see, like, I'd be really intrigued to see, like, somewhere down the line or even in the next issue, do we get a continuation or an expansion of these stories, or is it completely different stories, completely different worlds, completely different takes on things, completely different genres? And that alone is enough to grab my attention. So I highly recommend picking this up. Go to your store and grab it, and also remember Flash Gordon number 2 is also out as well. Pick that up and support the series. This is one of the best things that Mad Cave is doing right now. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot of great stuff coming out from Mad Cave Studios right now. But yeah, definitely go and support this icon as he's hitting 90 years, and the stuff that's coming out now is absolutely worth picking up. But I think that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you have enjoyed this. Please go down below and let us know if you've enjoyed Flash Gordon Quarterly. Excuse me. If you've been enjoying Flash Gordon Quarterly and the new Flash Gordon content coming out from Mad Cave Studios, what was your favourite of the 3 stories in this? Did you like the Hawkman? Did you like the Battle of Little Mingo? Or did you like Flash Detective Services? Also as well, let us know in the comments below any other comics you want to see us check out here on the channel. And remember that we're also going to be talking to Southard. That is going to be dropping later in the week here on the channel, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and don't miss out on it. But thank you so much for everything. I think that's going to be it for us for today. Remember, it is a good week to be a geek. We'll see you all soon. Peace.